You're listening to the Monday Night Community Show with Daniel on BRFM.
This is the Daniel Monday Night Community Show on demand through YouTube. Thank you very much for choosing to listen to us through this method. If you'd like to keep up to date with when I add new interviews, then subscribe to this channel. We're next going to be talking to Mandy and June. It's all part of the regular slot I do with the health visitor team here in Swale. We normally have a different subject to cover each time they come in. We're going to be covering domestic abuse this time around the World Cup as well. Firstly, as always, thank you very much for coming along this evening.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm Mandy, and I've obviously been here before to discuss various subjects with various different people. And today we want to discuss the subject of domestic abuse. A bit of a grim subject, but can have some very positive outcomes as well as some sad ones. And around the World Cup, where emotions get run high and drink flows, and there can be some real problems. And my colleague June.
Yeah, I'm June, and I'm part of the Swale Health Visiting Team, and I'm a domestic abuse lead for Swale. So I'll be talking about services available in the Swale area.
Well, I'm sure that everybody has heard of the subject of domestic abuse, and I know that there will be people out there, both men and women, and people in different relationships who will have experienced some kind of domestic abuse. And I think it's very important to start with a definition of what domestic abuse is. Most of us, I think, probably would, if we didn't know, would actually think that domestic abuse was being hit. Something where you were physically being injured or terrorised in some way. But in actual fact, there is a definition, and it's a definition from the Department of Health, and I'd like to just read it out to you and give you an idea of what we're talking about. So domestic abuse is any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive or threatening behaviour, violence or abuse between those aged 16 years or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members, regardless of gender or sexuality. This can encompass, but not limited to, psychological, physical, sexual, financial or emotional abuse. And we also know that stalking is another form of abuse that is now taken extremely seriously by the police, and even though that person, your partner, may not be living with you. So that is our definition that we work by. And also we have to think about other areas, for example, the honour-based violence we talk about, which is to do with families bringing shame upon families and the family taking it into their own hands to actually put things right in their way that they think it's right, but in actual fact it's a severe form of abuse. And we also have forced marriage, which is another thing that is an abusive thing, and female genital mutilation. So all of those things are all encompassed in the definition of domestic abuse.
And our subject this time is domestic abuse.
So what do you do if you find yourself in a domestic abuse situation and you live in the Swale area? There's lots of help out there. There's lots of people you can ring. It's not your fault and you're not alone. So I want you to remember that there are people there that can help you. Health visitor number has now changed, and it's 0300 1234 014. You'll be given a series of options to ring, to press a button, and you'll be able to get straight through to the duty health visitor. Twice a week we're open till 8 p.m, that's Tuesdays and Thursdays, otherwise it's 9 till 5. If you feel like you want to drop in and just talk to somebody about a domestic abuse situation, you want some legal advice, you want to talk to somebody from housing or the police, you have the Domestic Abuse One-Stop Shop at Phoenix House in Sittingbourne, opposite the police station. And that's every Tuesday, 9:30 to 11. And that's Tuesday morning, run by Satida volunteers, and there is a health visitor there at times, and that's me. Other drop-ins that don't always include the police and don't always include legal advice are at the Alexandra Centre in Faversham, 3 p.m. till 5 p.m. every Tuesday. Beaches in Minster, that's the Children's Centre, 9:30 till 11 a.m. every Wednesday. And the Gateway at Sheerness in the High Street is 1 till 3 every Wednesday. SATIDA stands for Swale Action to End Domestic Abuse, and their number is 01795 417 251, and someone will always be there to answer your call.
We are at the moment talking with Mandy and June. They're from the Health Visitor team, and our subject this time is domestic abuse. We are at the moment talking to Mandy and June. It's all part of the regular slot that I do with the Health Visitor team, Swale, and our subject for this visit is domestic abuse.
Hello again. Well, we've talked about the definition of domestic abuse, and that it's not just getting hit. It can be psychological, emotional. It can be verbal abuse, all kinds of abuse that is counted under this umbrella. So anybody out there can, if they are suffering from this, June has given some information about where you can go for help, and we will give you that again at the end of the show. I'm just going to give you a few statistics now, because they always sort of paint the picture a bit better, really. And we've got the crime survey for England and Wales in 2013, which is published by the Office of National Statistics. And we've got some figures here that are the ones that we know. I mean, we also know that there are an awful lot of hidden figures as well, things that that people don't come forward, and that we don't really know what the true extent of the problem is. But we know that 1.2 million women per year are subjected to a form of domestic abuse. Surprisingly, there are 800,000 men. It does affect men as well, and it affects men in heterosexual, homosexual, transgender relationships and bisexual relationships, and women as well, of course. And many sources will quote the following numbers, which are 1 in 4 women in a lifetime will experience some form of domestic abuse, and 1 in 7 men in a lifetime will experience some form of domestic abuse. These figures may vary, obviously, from year to year, from month to month, but those are the overall figures that we understand. Sadly and tragically, 2 women are killed every week in England and Wales in the context of domestic abuse, and you will find that you'll read in the papers, and it may surprise you that very often it's not mentioned that the reason for a death of a woman is domestic abuse, but there will be the husband or the partner or the ex-partner or somebody killed a woman in a fit of temper or for whatever reason, and it's not actually mentioned in the paper that it is domestic abuse, and it doesn't always hit the front pages. It often just sits away in the middle pages of the papers, and if you look in your papers, you'll find that there are a lot of women who are murdered for through domestic abuse, and this is not acknowledged. That's a very sad statistic, and one of our jobs as domestic abuse lead health visitors is to prevent that happening, is to prevent those deaths by being able to inform and educate people and get in to families and be able to support at a very early stage. So how do we relate that to the World Cup? Well, you may well have heard that there is extra support available through major sporting events. We also know that domestic abuse does increase around major sporting events such as the World Cup, and we know that the calls to the police do go up through these major events, and they have looked at international tournaments, and they have looked at local tournaments as well, which increase the calls to the police. Patterns show that the domestic abuse calls increase after the end of a match time and can continue till about 1 o'clock in the morning during weekdays and 3 o'clock at weekends. So it's an early domestic abuse onset when a match is played at a weekend or has a late evening kick-off is likely to be increased opportunities for alcohol consumption, which is extended licensing hours, people being either disappointed or happy depending on the result, and that does actually increase the incidences. Although I would like to say that alcohol, drugs, being upset, mental health, any of those things are not the root cause of domestic abuse. They are there and they actually do exacerbate it, but they don't actually cause a domestic abuse. That is a whole different story. It's not an excuse. So as we're looking at a lot of the games for the World Cup this year, they are quite late at night, and it will mean that there will be people out and about drinking and getting either happy or sad after those matches, and that is where the flashpoints can be. But there is support and there is help, and the police are aware that this could happen and they are ready to respond.
So we've heard about what domestic abuse is and where to get help, and we're going to hear shortly from Mandy some little episodes from a book, some poems about children that have been at the blunt end of domestic abuse and how that's affected them. we know that it does cause harm in children because it causes them physical and emotional harm. It can make them aggressive or withdrawn. It can let them have behavioural problems. It stops them from learning as well as they might and developing as well as they might. It disrupts their education. Children are afraid, they can wet the bed, it can affect their eating and have long-term consequences. And even if you don't think that your child has heard anything or that they have suffered, or they're not hearing any of the suffering of domestic abuse, they can. So if you are a man or a woman and you are suffering from domestic abuse, you feel that you have to walk on eggshells to get away from your partner, you feel that your partner abuses you emotionally, insults you, belittles you with comments, calls you names, ignores you, sulks or acts angrily. Your partner tells you who you should see, if you can have your friends, how you should dress, and controls your life, and gets very jealous for no reason. If your partner is physically violent to you or others, or even if that's just grabbing you or pushing you to get in the way, or if your partner has extreme mood swings, being kind to you one moment and very cruel the next, you are suffering from domestic abuse. Mandy.
Yes, teenagers and young children and babies are all affected by domestic abuse, and we know that babies can be affected in the womb, and we also know that pregnancy is one of the flashpoints for the start of domestic abuse, where all of a sudden the woman has now got something else to think about and not just the partner, and pregnancy can be quite a risky time. The effects on children are long-lasting, but they can be reversed, and there is a lot of support and help out there that can actually help children to progress and develop normally, and that can be through schools or it can be through local domestic abuse services. There has been a book written that actually talks about that gives some of the stories about the way children have been affected. And this is actually a little book called Freedom's Flowers, and it's the effects of domestic abuse on children. So I think at the end of the day, we need to think about those of us that have children. We need to think about what this is doing to children, and try to seek help and to stop this happening. So Daffodil says, I would wake up hearing my son scream and cry, and when I opened the bedroom door to get to him, we lived in a bungalow, my ex would suddenly appear from a different room as fast as lightning and not allow me to get into my son's room, or he would be in there and at the bedroom door blocking my way. We agreed to split, but agreed to stay in the same house to look after our disabled child. I was totally controlled, emotionally, but didn't know it. I felt it, but didn't understand. I kept repeating it in my head. He's a good father. I was trying to make it true because the other option was unthinkable. If I didn't play by his rules, his punishment to me was to stop me seeing my child when we were together. It was not being allowed to say good night or put him to bed. Even if my son was crying for me, I used to sit there, as the last time I tried to get to him, my ex dropped my child on the floor, at no older than 6 months, and wouldn't pick him up until I left to sit down in the lounge. I carried that guilt and saw him use that threat time and again. Lavender says, when people consider abuse and its effect on children, they are probably thinking about kids between the ages of 3 and 15. I think babies are the forgotten victims in these situations due to their perceived lack of understanding. My experience has taught me that although babies do not have the intellectual capacity to process the events going on around them, they are definitely affected by the atmosphere. When my daughter was born, she was very discontented. She would constantly cry and was always unsettled. Being a first-time mother, I simply just put her behaviour down to lack of routine. I thought she was hungry, colicky, teething, or just being a newborn. Not once did it occur to me that she was picking up on the horrific vibes between her father and me. When she would cry, my first instinct was to give her my breast, then check her nappy, and then give her a cuddle. I became frustrated and felt inadequate as a mother, when at times none of these things worked. I just could not work her out, and would look at her in absolute desperation, thinking, what do you want from me? What am I doing wrong? Why can't I make you happy? Ironically, these are the very questions I would often ask her father. I left my ex-partner when my baby was 13 weeks old after he attacked me whilst I held her in my arms. I left the flat we shared in heavy snow with no money, the clothes on my back and just her changing bag, but it was the best decision I ever made. My daughter was like a different baby when we left. She was happy and content. The crying stopped and she was no longer jumpy. When we lived with her father, his mother remarked on how jumpy she was all the time. Admittedly, I do feel guilty about that first 3 months in the world were so unhappy, but I truly underestimated the effect it was having on her. I never understood properly until I witnessed the positive change in her behaviour once we had left. I am just glad I made the break for both our sakes. Now I can provide her with the loving home environment she deserves.
Talking to Mandy and June. They're from the health visitor team, Swale, and our subject has been domestic abuse this evening.
So just going to run through a couple of numbers again for you. The Swale Health Visiting Team on 0300 1234 014, open 9 till 5 most days, but Tuesday and Thursday we're open till 8 p.m. The other place you can go to get help with domestic abuse is the National Domestic Abuse Violence Helpline, but we say abuse because it's not about just violence. 0808, say that again, 0808 2000 247. And you can also contact the Kent Police by texting or ringing 101 for information about local help and support.
And we're just going to finish off by just one final sentence. We hope you've got lots of information this evening, and we hope that it's just got you thinking about whether you or a friend or relative or somebody that you know is suffering from domestic abuse. We know that the World Cup is upon us now, and we do know that the incidences will rise. So don't sit out there and suffer in silence. Please ask for help. Just one final thing to say, and thank you for listening. But people often say, instead of asking, why doesn't she just leave? People should be asking, why doesn't he just stop?
I'd like to thank you both very much for coming along and covering that subject for us this evening.
You're welcome.
That is Mandy and June this evening, coming along as part of our health visitor slot, and they were covering domestic abuse as our subject this evening, and we will be being visited by them very shortly once again here at the Monday Night Community Show.